First of all, I wanted to say when Glenn contacted me with regards to being able to share our experiences with you as a group, I had no hesitation, and the reason being is I have a bit of a soft spot towards the Seventh-day Adventist Church. It's a personal story that connected with one of my close relatives, an older cousin of mine, who for many years struggled in life and had some pretty rough things happen along the way, including a husband who was ultimately put in jail for fraud and various other things that she really went through, severe health challenges, and she was pretty down and out, and there was kind of a lack of hope. Light was going out, and there was a moment of revelation where God really spoke to her, and it was through an interaction with a Christian from a little Seventh-day Adventist church in Warrnambool in Victoria. And it was through that interaction that she then started going to that church. And now, a few years later, she's a transformed woman. And my wife and I caught up with her about 6 months ago and had dinner with her. And she's gleaming. The light is back on. You can see life beaming from her. She's healthy, she's positive, she's engaged in church, basically running the show now, and she's even a vegetarian. So I think she's embraced the full package. But so for me, coming here today was part of me being able to give back to a church that has given to our family. So I want to thank you and your fellow ministers and so forth for that. It's an interesting thing to step into the world of inside SRC and doing the surveys and embracing the idea of school improvement. It's no easy journey, but it's an important one. And the fact that you're sitting in this room today and willing to open yourselves up to the opportunity to grow in this space is a credit to you, because I can tell you, like I said, even though it's hard, it's a journey worth doing, and it actually does begin with the people in this room. And so to Glenn and the team, credit to you, because I think this could be a really exciting time for you individually as schools, but also as a movement. I wanted to share a quick anecdote, an experience that I had partway through our journey with the Insight SRC surveys and Dr. Peter Hart and so forth. It was a couple of years ago. I was doing as one of the summer courses at the Graduate School of Education at Harvard in Cambridge, Boston, and enjoying a good break, and everything was really going well. And if you get the opportunity one day to embrace that, it's very accessible and very worthwhile. The course was actually, ironically, on turnaround leadership, and it was an interesting experience. It was part way through that, and back home we started the process of an intensive work with Dr. Hart on Insight SRC and school improvement, and I'll talk more about the details of that. And it was around June, and so we're about 6 months into this, and I received a phone call from one of my campus principals, and he was in absolute disarray. He was broken, he was down, he felt demoralised, and he felt like this whole process was not only destroying his leadership, but it was severely affecting the morale and the capacity of his team and so forth. Now, when you're on the other side of the world and one of your key leaders is talking in that way, including concerns around his own personal well-being, you feel a bit, I guess, disempowered or lack of a capacity to really make change or have influence. But we spoke through it and we worked through it. And it was kind of a symbolic moment. He'd been confronted in a meeting in front of the school improvement team where Peter Hart questioned his integrity. And there was a whole story around that, but it was a very confronting moment for him as a leader, and left him feeling very vulnerable and out of the limb. And I combined that with a couple of other experiences at that stage in our journey, and it was kind of the bottom of the pit. really hit hard times in this journey and were having to face some really hard things. The interesting thing about that campus principal, who's a very capable leader, now he is the biggest advocate of Insight SRC you would ever meet. He knows the booklets, the toolkits, everything inside out, even to the point now when we have new staff coming in the school, he's the one that's actually running the inductions to convince them and show them the importance of this and how much it is a part of our everyday culture and practice at Flinders. And so the transformation was incredible over that next 6 to 12 month period after that difficult time. He started to move beyond the pain and the hurt, the confrontation of what he was having to deal with, and the difficulties of Dr. Hart at times, and come to realise the value and the importance and the impact that this can have when you embrace it and do it well. So if you are ever at a point of doubt, when you ever hit that point where you think this is too much, or this is a waste of time, or this is negative, having negative impact, think of that story, because I can tell you that the transformation can and will come with perseverance. So why did we embrace Insight SRC? When I took on Flinders as executive principal, it was about nearly 6 years ago. It was in a bit of dire straits. Financially, it was struggling. It had gone from a school in 1984, I think it was, of about 30 students to peaking at about 2,000 students. But when I got it, it was starting to decline, particularly its oldest campus, who'd been around for that entire time, was starting to decline in numbers. Competition was increasing around. There was a negative staff culture starting to creep in, student results were struggling. It was kind of your perfect storm when you come into a school. And we realised, in conjunction with the board, but the leadership at the time, that the school had gone through a massive process of expansion, and their vision at the time was Christian education for as many young people as possible. And so we recognised that was a great time for that season, but we didn't want to just be this big, giant school with lots of students, but no depth and heart or capacity in what we do. So part of embracing Insight SRC was we were actually wanting to go deeper rather than wider. We wanted to actually live what we said we were, rather than just it being a nice label on a website or on a prospectus. As I said, we were stagnant in growth, and we actually too wanted to be able to move into a season where we were more willing to use data and measurements and things to help inform our decision making, rather than just subjective gut feel or, this is the way we've kind of always done it, so that's why we do it, or allow personalities to dominate, because that, with a lack of measurement, often strong personalities are the ones that call the shots, which is not an easy thing to deal with. I remember prior to a leadership position, prior to coming into executive principal, I was talking to one of the campus principals at our eldest campus, and I was saying, so how do you project future enrolments and so forth for your campus? And he said, well, I sit down and I look at the cars in the car park, and if it's looking a bit fuller than it did the year before, then I jack it up about 5%, and that looks about right for where we're going. So needless to say, we've done a little bit of work since then, but that's the danger of subjectivity, and that's the danger of personalities. And when you're trying to engage in school improvement, data and figures and surveys aren't everything, but they do have an important place. And we wanted to be able to move beyond the previous practice and become a bit more professional and informed in our decision making. I don't know if many of you have had much to do with Dr. Peter Hart, but one thing I can say to you is he's certainly the man that you love to hate. If ever a person is willing to call a spade, it's Dr. Hart. And the interesting thing about him is he's absolutely brilliant. His mind, his knowledge, his capacity, his understanding of what constitutes school improvement. There is no one better in the industry in that capacity. And he's an incredibly courageous and resilient man too, in the sense that anyone who's willing to sit in multiple executive rooms with school leaders and be willing to call them out on their behaviours and attitudes and the struggles that he's seen in their schools, time in, time out, takes an incredible spirit and capacity. And I know, even though he's not overt about it, he has quite an underlying faith in the way that he goes about doing things. But the thing about him is he can be brutal. And that's something that you have to be prepared for, and in many ways you have to come to accept. Because no matter how much it hurts, no matter how much it's confronting, no matter how much you feel vulnerable about it, 9 times out of 10 what he says to you will be right. What he sees in your school probably will be right. There will be some nuances, there will be some things that you think, oh, I may think a little bit differently. But when it comes to the core of it and the things that really matter, he will be right. And so there's an element there that despite the challenges of him and his personality and his manner in the way he goes about things, if he can move beyond the offence, there's actually an opportunity to tap into some people that can do significant things for not only you personally as a leader, but for your team. So what did we discover when we started to move into the whole area of Insight SRC? The first thing I would say is we realised that we weren't as good as we thought we were. That there were some blind spots and some issues that we needed to face. We have really good students at Flinders. It's a lovely Christian school environment. We don't have a huge amount of behavioural issues and things like that. We do have lovely staff and so forth, but our students, they were pretty much compliant, and also they pretty much hated school. They were bored, they were disengaged, their well-being was low, as the reports indicated. It was a confronting time. In many ways, our staff also had lacked a genuine sense of collective ownership. They'd been through a period, I don't know whether other schools have experienced that, but there was multiple times of constant change. The next new thing, the next new thing, the next new thing, to the point where if you raise the issue of another new thing, they'd almost walk out of the staff room. It's not good for staff engagement, but they were pretty much fed up with change, and they were disengaged, and they'd gone into their bunkers and were shutting up shop. They also had learned to live out a culture of what Insight SRC call learnt helplessness. And so there's this combination of learnt helplessness from the staff. I'm desperate, I'm overworked, I'm stressed, I can't do this, you need to come in and help me. And not just help me, but you really need, what they're saying is you need to do it for me. That was rampant throughout Flinders. And in combination with that, the idea of rescue leadership, where you're too kind, you're too nice, you come in and it's that, the staff member has to make that difficult phone call to the parent, and rather than working with them and getting them to do it, you go, you don't worry about that, I'll step in and make that phone call for you. And rescue leadership like that was rampant throughout Flinders as well. It was cultural, it was embedded in the everyday practice of Flinders. And when that starts to happen, it's really hard to make progress or get ownership or engagement because staff really feel like they don't have the capacity to actually do it, which is a sad place to be. And the other element that we were really confronted with, and Dr. Hart really called us on, was the idea of top-down leadership. And the interesting thing is, I think it's actually pretty common in schooling environments. Schools are hierarchical. They're naturally so, and there's a need for that to a certain degree. But our leaders didn't really understand the difference between being leaders and being managers. For them, being a leader meant I can come up with all the fantastic ideas and then then inform everyone what they need to do and how they're going to go about doing it. And that was the extent of their strategy, their engagement, their leadership. It was top down and it was disengaging for staff. So they were some of the things that we were actually really confronted with as a team. So maybe like some people in this room, and maybe like we were, when you first get these results and when you first start presenting them to staff, the first thing is, no, that can't be right. Our students love us, we've got great relationship, our students are really happy, you know, we're great teachers, we're great leaders. Surely there's something wrong with the data that you're being presented with. They were the kind of responses that we had in those early days. We thought that we had the capacity to be able to do it ourselves. We thought we could read a couple of books, we were capable leaders, and we understood what school improvement required. And so we dabbled in the area of school improvement. You know, we give it the school improvement team a bit of a go. It was a bit haphazard. We'd try a few of the tools here or there. And we thought just through our capacity and our natural enthusiasm, everything would turn around. After 3 years, it didn't. Of taking an approach, it didn't actually turn around. If anything, in some cases, it was actually declining in our results. And I would say, and I'll share one of our campus's results a bit later on, that our results actually weren't that good to begin with. So the fact that they were starting to decline in some areas was an indication that maybe we weren't as good as we thought we were. And I think at the heart of it, there's this unwillingness or a subconscious unwillingness to actually accept that something needs to be fixed. And that often that fixing starts with us. I remember sitting in a briefing with Dr. Hart. We had our college executive team, which is my campus principals and CFO and others in there. And we were going through the results, and there was a lot of excuse making and defensiveness and that going on. And I remember Peter just stopping the conversation right there and pointing at one of my campus principals and goes, do you know what? You're too quick to jump to solutions and you don't allow your staff to engage. You need to change. He points to the other one and he goes, all I can say is, you don't know how to lead. And that was it. So you can imagine the tension in the room at that point. That's a little bit of Peter's style. But the thing was, he was 100% right. The one that the principal that he spoke to and said, you jump to solutions too quick, was a young leader who was in his early 30s, who was in his second year of being a campus principal, who had come into the role from a head of sub-school position, thinking that he needed to have to show everyone that he had all the answers. And so whenever anyone came to him, he'd be right, I know what to do, this is what we're going to do, go and do it. And so his capacity to listen, to travel with, to walk with his staff, to hear them and then to form solutions together didn't exist. And so he was disempowering not only his leaders but his staff, because he'd jump to solutions and tell everyone what needed to be done. And so Peter was 100% right. The other one where he pointed out and said, you don't know how to lead. This particular principle, and it's still something that we have to work with him a little bit, but he couldn't understand the concept of allowing staff to speak into school change. That allowing staff to have a voice and contribute to help forming the goals and directions of the college. To allow staff to be released to engage in projects that he didn't actually have his finger on the pulse with, and empower and support them to be able to champion those outcomes. He couldn't grasp that, which was at the heart of really good leadership. And so in both those circumstances, the change for school improvement started with our key leaders, including myself. That even for pointed out and indicated that I was a classical rescue leader, that I'm naturally wired that when a staff member is struggling, I have an empathy to want to run in, rescue them, save them, make sure they're okay and keep everything okay. And that's something that I had to confront and learn. So there were things there that were underlying in our response that are naturally part of this as you go through school improvement. Facing the dragon. This is a really interesting one, and this is going to be the biggest point and the most important point in your journey as leaders with not only yourselves but with your teams, is making the decision to step over the threshold and take on the dragon and be willing to do that with all that it comes with all the fire and brimstone and challenges that you're faced with. Because I can tell you now, I've learned from experience through this process over the last 4 or 5 years that healthy organisational climate is absolutely key to the success of your schools. If you can't develop and maintain a successful or a healthy organisational climate, then I can tell you, you are always going to be hitting a wall, and that's what we had. We would be hitting this wall, we couldn't quite get there, we couldn't quite get staff on board, we couldn't quite lift student results, we couldn't quite improve well-being, we couldn't quite get the spiritual and missional atmosphere of our college thriving, and we were surviving, we weren't thriving. And so we recognised that organisational climate, if we don't address it as Dr. Hart describes it, as the billabong up the stream, where if the water's poisoned at one part of the river or the stream, then it's usually 2 or 3 billabongs up, there's a dead animal in the billabong that's poisoning everything else downstream. And unless you're willing to address organisational climate, then that negative or unhealthy climate will flow downstream and affect student outcomes, well-being, staff engagement, the whole lot. It's about facing the dragon and being willing to do that. So we decided to jump in, boots and all. After 3 years of not getting anywhere with it, we decided to sign Dr. Peter Hart up for a 12 to 18-month full intensive, which included 2 or 3 day coaching session at the start of the year, both with our school improvement team and with our executive leaders. It included multiple coaching sessions throughout the year with Dr. Hart, and one of those ones I described earlier when I got the phone call when I was at Harvard was one of those sessions, in one of those coaching sessions. But then at the end, later in the year, he does, with every executive leader, he does a 360 review, but then he does a personality test with it, and then a 1.5 hour coaching session one-on-one with each executive leader. And it's in those moments that all the pieces for a lot of leaders start to come together. And the amazing thing I love about the fact that he does the 360 with the personality test, because he takes the results from the 360 and then he shows you your personality test, and he shows you how the personality of you actually connects with some of the areas or the gaps or the strengths within your 360 and how they relate. Because the amazing thing that we've learned throughout this process is that in the absence of appropriate systems and processes and empathy and clarity, personality takes over. So when you start to struggle, when you start to hit the wall, when you start to panic, your personality will kick in and it will take over and it will push everything backwards. And so what he tries to do through that process is make you aware of the impact that your personality has on the way that you lead and the way that your community functions. And it's incredibly enlightening how much those two things, the 360 and the personality test, combine to give you a very clear picture of who you are and how that affects your organisation. So yeah, it was an interesting experience that we were engaged in. What did it reveal? Well, it revealed a lot of things. I remember at one point with it, about halfway through the first year, we had to bring all of our staff together at each campus, and the SIT team, school improvement team, had to run some sessions with those staff on, the whole idea was bringing culture to the surface. You see, whether you like it or not, in each of your schools, there's an underpinning culture, not the one that you hope it would be, but the one that's really there. And often we allow it to be covered up because we never give enough voice to our staff and an environment in which they can speak freely and publicly about the things that they're struggling with. And so that was a massive issue for us as a school, and we had to almost overcompensate in order to allow that voice. So here we were a group of executive leaders sitting in an auditorium with about, in one case at our entire campus with about 120 staff in that auditorium. We weren't allowed to say a word, we weren't allowed to respond, we weren't allowed to make any sort of defensive or clarifying statements. We just had to allow the school improvement team to lead the conversation and bring culture to the surface and allow our staff to speak the things that were hidden that we otherwise hadn't been seen. And I can tell you, it's one of the most daunting, surreal moments of my career as staff started to bring to surface the things that they were really struggling with. They were struggling with fear. They were struggling with a lack of empowerment. They were struggling with the idea that they felt disconnected from leadership. There was all these things were coming to the surface. There were tears. There was frustration. There was all range of things that came into that moment. But they also created a platform for healing and for progression forward. Because for the first time, our staff were able to express those things that had been suppressed or dormant for so long. And although it was almost feeling like rock bottom when we were on that journey, I look back at that moment and I realised it was actually the beginning point of us being able to move into a new future, to be able to put the past behind and enable our staff to embrace the idea of a new future. And so it was hard, but I never regret that. And sometimes that is the challenges and the reality of genuine school improvement. So making culture visible is really important, often overcompensating for a lack of voice. One thing I would say is the pillars that are part of inside SRC, the empathy, the clarity, the empowerment, the learning. You'll see later on that I reflect on those with regards to our results. But they are so powerful when you can start to understand them, embrace them, and to use them. And I would say if any of those that is most important, it's the empathy one. And by empathy, I think you refer to it as supportive leadership. It is the most powerful thing for school transformation. And the amazing thing about it is that it begins with you. If you can understand it, if you can embrace the idea of what empathetic or supportive leadership is, I can tell you the effect on your community, the transformative power on your leadership team, and the effect that then flows onto your students will be dramatic. And I've seen it, and it is an absolutely essential part. And it's the kind of the foundation, the cornerstone for the other three to be able to launch from. But I think most of all that I have to acknowledge is the concept of humility. One thing I'm really proud of with our team at Flinders and this whole process is that they were hugely humble and courageous in going through this process. A lot of leaders would shy away from it. They only hear what they want to hear. They don't want to face the dragon. But it was because of the humility of the team that we were able to do this. So being able to model that and being able to elicit that within your leaders is an important part in taking this journey forward. And the other element that was a big one was encouraging the idea of brave conversations. I don't know about you, but I've kind of found that Christian schools are pretty nice places. One time we had an all-staff day at the start of the year, and we had a bit of a session at the end, a bit of a workshop, and then we asked, you get some feedback and so forth, and so anyone found any gaps and so forth, and not a hand went up. Surely there's some gaps, not a hand went up. Anyone found some positives, about 20 hands went up. That's kind of the Christian school environment. Peter feels that one of our biggest problems is we're too nice. I don't think you can ever be too nice. But I think the point that he's trying to make is sometimes that balance between truth and grace doesn't always exist. And there's a lot of grace, a lot of understanding, a lot of rescue leadership, but we'll often shy away from the importance of truth, being able to provide constructive and appropriate feedback, willing to be able to say to our team, do you know what, we probably didn't hit the mark there and we need to do some work, and let's get in together and let's make this happen. Providing truth doesn't mean destroying people or criticising. If anything, if we love our staff and our leadership, then the willingness to have brave conversations is an expression of fruit of that. And so I would encourage you that that's an important part of the whole journey. So what did we learn about ourselves? I spoke before about the idea, a minute ago, about the idea of empathy. Can I tell you that the idea of empathy and supportive leadership is actually an active thing? It's not a felt thing. I had a meeting with a group of staff, and I think being empathetic has a lot to do with the idea of staff feeling heard, listened to, and supported. And I said to him, what does it mean to feel heard? And one young leader who was actually a part of one of our school improvement teams, and she was in her mid to late 20s, but a fantastic young female leader who really stepped up to the plate. And she said, when I come and talk to leadership, they listen to me, and then something appropriate happens. That's what it means to feel heard. And the interesting comment she made after that was, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they do what I wanted them to do, but they've heard me enough to take action and help find a solution that improves the situation and helps me grow and helps the school and students be better. And I think in many ways that young teacher summed up the idea of empathy. It's that idea of being able to sit down with a staff member to be able to actually genuinely engage in a conversation with the idea of trying to find the truth and the importance of their world and what it is that they're struggling with. And then actively willing to work with them to find a solution. And not in 3 months' time and, not in a nice email, thank you for the conversation, but within an appropriate time period, responding to that need and helping them find that solution. And not rescuing them, but helping them become better in what they do. I can tell you, the power of that is hugely transformative. If you and your team are doing that regularly on a day-by-day basis, then the impact on your staff members will be absolutely visible. The fruit will be there and it will flow onto your students. That's the importance and the power of empathy and how it affects school improvement. There was also a severe lack of accountability. One thing we learned as an executive team, Peter was sitting in a conversation with us, with our college executive, myself and the other campus principals and so forth. And because we have 2 campuses and then an off-site kinder, we would often come together twice a term to meet and to share information, a bit of an FYI, check in on how everyone's going, and then sort of release everyone to go back out into them. And he really challenged us and said, well, why are you meeting? Why are you getting together? What's the importance of this? What value is you as a team coming together, adding Are you just a bunch of individual silo campuses coming together in order to have a nice get-together, tap each other on the back, share a bit of information, then go back out to your silos? Or are you a group of leaders that have responsibility for making decisions for this college that will ensure that there's a united and collective vision for the future that you take responsibility for and you work for collectively, and that you own when you go back to your campuses, and that it's not individual agendas that are driving the system? And it was a really confronting meeting because it actually really exposed us as lacking a willingness to have accountability for those areas that we're responsible for. So what we created was, rather than KPIs, we created key responsibility areas. What are those things that for me as an executive principal that we as a team that we're responsible for? What are those areas? Things like the development of culture, resource management, those sorts of things. You know, the spiritual climate. Then what's out of that? What's important for me? What are my key responsibility areas that I have to take responsibility for and be held accountable for? And then the same for my principals and others. And what that started to do was make us realise that there's patches and elements of our daily life and school improvement that we have control and responsibility for, but we also need to hold each other accountable. And that then flows down into our staff. We would not hold our staff accountable. And I don't mean in a negative sense. I mean in a sense of not being willing to have those truthful conversations with them. And the incredible thing is, now that we've started to do that, some of our staff who for years, you may have them in your school, really nice people, struggled to teach well. The students would either walk over them or not like them. So you kind of shift them from this subject to that subject, to this department to that department, to try and keep them out of trouble and not affect too many people at once. But as we start to now take an approach of accountability in a positive place, from a place of love with grace in it, these people are now starting to flourish. They're actually starting to enjoy their work. They're actually getting good feedback from the kids and the parents. And all of a sudden, it's not a case of moving them on, but moving them up. Because the power of accountability done in the right way is a great way to improve the outcomes of your environment. An interesting one was that as we went through the whole goal setting process and everything like that, is that our staff were not focused on students at all. We went through a process of setting goals, we went through a process of helping them co-construct our future for the campus and for the college. Not once did the students come up. Not once. And that actually really reflected then on the way that our students were feeling. We tested our results with Insight SRC because when you get them, you often think these can't be right, as I said earlier. We used a survey called Social Emotional Wellbeing Survey through ASA. Some of you may have heard it. They have the PAT testing for maths and literacy and so forth, but they have one for social emotional wellbeing. It's actually a really brilliant survey to be able to do. And we tested that. And our insight surveys were saying our students were distressed, they were disengaged in the classroom, they didn't rate our teachers, but they felt safe. And so when we did the SO surveys, the thing that came back was, in all aspects of their life, in the majority of cases, at most year levels, their family life was okay, in general they were okay with their friends and so forth, but when it came to the school environment, they hated it. And it was actually some really bad results in that area that further confirmed and supported the results from Insight SRC. We then, as a part of Christian Schools Australia, did engage in a survey process with relational schools, which really, it's all about relationships. So they surveyed the students and the staff about staff-to-student relationships and student-to-student relationships. And the interesting thing with that was the results for our staff to student relationship was really poor. Really, really poor. And yet our staff would sit there and say, we have a great relationship with our students. You know, things, we get along really well there, and they behave in class, and you know, we're getting through the curriculum. But the students themselves, a bit like the staff, weren't speaking up. They didn't have a voice. They didn't have what they felt was positive, engaging relationships. And most of all, they didn't feel known by their staff. Parker Palmer talks about the importance of to know and to be known. People want to know that you know them, and even more importantly, they want to know you. And when that starts to happen, relationships start to flourish, and then engagement starts to build, and then people start to grow and thrive. And our staff didn't know our students, and our students didn't know our staff. And that just further confirmed the results of the insight surveys. The interesting thing that we found in that as well, one that was a real blind spot for us, that's something to really think about as you go back to your schools, is that our student-to-student relationship too was really poor. And then interestingly, that's actually even more impacting than the staff-to-student relationship. And one of the reasons that was really important to us was that we have things like home group each morning and pastoral care periods and so forth. We were doing nothing in the space of helping our students to build connections, friendships, a sense of belonging with their peers and their broader group. And as a result of that, their experience of school, their personal well-being, and their willingness to engage was hitting rock bottom. But the fantastic outcome of that is that because we were aware of that, because of the insight surveys and those two surveys, in the space of 2 years we redid the Relation Schools survey at our entire campus, and we were now had the highest ranking out of all schools in Christian Schools Australia, out I think it was 21 schools that did it across Australia, and we now have the highest ranking out of everyone with regards to both staff-to-student relationships and student-to-student. So because we were aware of it, over that 2-year period, through the school improvement process, we were able to make a dramatic difference, and we're still working on it. We still want to go even further because we realise how valuable and important that is. So now I just want to share the impact of that 12 to 18 months and that had on our results. As I said, originally they weren't that great, and we've still got a long way to go. But if you look at these results, I've just focused on the 4 pillars because we don't have time to dig in on the detail. But if you look at the results for 2017, they weren't great for our Carrum Downs campus. In particular, if you look at the empathy section, it's pretty low. And that reflected in our staff engagement and reflected in our student results as well. The interesting thing, after 12 months of really giving a real red hot go, including that moment where this is the campus where that principal who rang me when I was at Harvard, this is his campus. Including all those moments along the way, you can see the dramatic improvement in the space of 12 months. It almost doubled, or we did double in some cases. Now that we've still got a journey to go, which we still want to improve and go further. But the important thing about that is we're able to make progress. We're able to go back to the staff and to our leadership and everything and say, look, when we engage with this and when we do it properly and we're serious about it and we embrace it with humility and courage, then improvement can happen. And there's flow-on effects from this that you don't realise. Interestingly, out of that year, the following year, we had so many enrolment inquiries for our Year 7 that I think for this year coming in, that we actually had to put on an extra stream at Year 7. the climate, the word, the feedback started to get out there, and all of a sudden, and we've now got waiting lists for the next 2 or 3 years at Year 7 at this campus, with the hope of being able to maintain that extra stream over the coming years. And not that it's all about numbers, but it's kind of those unexpected fruits that come from having the courage to face the dragon and go through the process. One other set of results that I want to share with you in a second is we have a corporate services group that and admin group that works across both campuses, which include the Chief Financial Officer and our Head of IT and those sorts of people. A mistake that we made was we didn't give enough focus to those corporate staff in the idea of school improvement. And so in 2018, when the campuses actually dramatically improved in their results, our corporate services staff actually stayed stagnant and declined in a couple of areas. So in 2018, we actually got their key leaders to do some of the training. We worked with them in building the language and the toolkit and everything into it. And I even took the dramatic approach as a leader. I was previously leading that group. I actually appointed our CFO as chair of that group, but then as kind of the caretaker, but appoint a rolling chair, so that everyone, all the leaders in that group, would actually play a role at some point in the year of chairing that committee and that leadership team. And you can see in the space of 12 months, there was a dramatic shift, even for our corporate services team, by taking this approach, by actually starting to empower them and giving them the opportunity to own the process. We were able to see some really good improvement. And once again, we're still working on that. I'm almost, these are the last couple of slides, but I wanted to be able to say to you, the insight process is far more than the data. The data is just a signpost on the way to a better future. And it has to be, in time, as you get to understand it more, interpreted in light of your environment and your setting. But there's some amazing things that come from it. One of the things that really dawned on me that we've worked really hard on as a result of the insight process was it became very clear to me that we had a distinct lack of our sense of identity. We didn't know who we are, hence the fact that part of my thesis is actually to focus on the idea of a missional Christian school model. Flinders came out of the Christian community schools of the 70s and 80s. I think you're probably aware of, there was sort of the parent-controlled models that were predominantly closed enrollment and really catering for just Christian families. And then the community schools stepped out a bit more and eventually became more open enrollment and were for any families, but kept a very strict employment policy around hiring Christian teachers and being quite explicit in the Christian walk that we engage with. So Flinders was a part of that community school work, but what happened was a lot of the leaders from the parent-controlled environments would often come across into the community schools. And what we had was this idea of opening the doors to non-Christian families and kids, but overlaying a closed enrollment, parent-controlled model onto Christian schooling. And so for a long time, Flinders had this kind of conflicting sense of identity, not really knowing who it was, and including with that being a low-fee-paying school. Are we an academic school? Do we want to compete with the best schools in the district? Do we want to? So there was all these questions around who are we? And so having a sense of identity is absolutely essential to creating a clear line of sight. So we went through a heavy process of creating an identity statement to be able to engage with our community, to define who we are, and then making that public and explicit so that if anyone ever asks that question, who is Flinders Christian Community College? What is your identity? The majority your staff will be able to turn around and say, this is who we are. And it then opened the door to be able to then embrace other things which I'll share in a moment. We recognised that things like our schedules, our meetings, the way that we go about running meetings, making them effective, we were doing them really badly. And the fruit is you start to become more efficient in those areas. You start working in the area of building clarity. Clarity is not writing up-to-date job descriptions. In our first 2 years of the Insight process, everyone said, well, clarity, you've got to know what you're doing. So we spent 12 months rewriting job descriptions. That's not clarity. Clarity is building a very clear sense of purpose and direction for the future that people can understand, buy in, and help understand what that means for them in their patch. That's what clarity is. And so that really helped us to then project into a whole number of areas, which I'll give you an example of now. As a result of the Insight process, we created what we call our school improvement framework. One thing I've learned about strategic plans is that in the old model of create your vision, create your goals for the next 5 years, create your operational plan that goes with it, and then plug away at that for 5 years and then start it all over again. And the reality is in schooling environments, they are dynamic, the educational environment is constantly changing, and our communities are constantly changing. You only have to look at technology in the last probably 6 or 7 years and the massive dramatic change that's experienced. A 5-year plan around technology that was written, 5 years ago is not going to cut it for now. So what we recognised is the most important thing we can do for our staff is provide them with a line of sight. What does the ultimate future look like? What does the ideal future look like? And what are those areas that we need to focus on that will help us to move towards that? So we identified student learning, pastoral care, faith and community, and stewardship as the 4 key areas. And surrounding that are our values. And those values are our behaviours. The behaviours that are going to help us and support us in realising this future state. So what we did with that is, for student learning, for example, we asked the question, what does it mean when we talk about learning and teaching at Flinders Christian Community College, what do we actually mean? If we were in an ideal state in the future, what would that look like? And the interesting thing is, in a schooling environment, if you don't have something like this in place, then the process of defining teaching and learning depends on the individual. And often it's the most powerful personalities that take over and define for your community what learning and teaching is all about. When you talk about the idea of curriculum, what curriculum looks like and how it's created, if you don't actually define a future state of how that works and what it should look like, then any individual can determine, and often they do, what that is. The maths department will be doing it differently to the English department. The Year 10 teacher in English will be doing it differently to the Year 7 teacher. When it comes to reporting, if you don't have those sorts of, if you haven't defined what these things look like, how can you work towards them and build a collective consistency, clarity, purpose for the work and the professional development and the growth that you're doing if staff don't know what the ideal future state looks like? So the process we've done is we actually have started to and almost finished. This is the first one that we created, was a learning and teaching framework. For each of those 4 previous areas, we've actually created a framework for each of those that defines that future state. But what we've said to staff is, we've worked with you. We didn't just sit in a room by ourselves and create it. We worked with our staff to build this future state. We now want you to help us define the journey. However that is a 2-year cycle where for a 2-year period we will go, what's the one thing in each of these areas that we need to work on as a collective community, as a whole college, to be able to move towards the school improvement, the ideal state that we want to be. And once we know what those 4 things are, we then need to determine together how we're going to get there to do it and start to define the how. And the amazing thing about that is it gives empowerment. It actually releases you as a leader to be able to empower your staff. And that's an example of the fruit and some of the unexpected things that come from working with the insight process. It's an incredible journey that can be challenging, it can be confronting. Some people will never embrace it, some people become absolute champions of it. But I can tell you, and from my own experience and from the experience of Flinders, that if you really want to grow your schools, if you really want to bring glory to God in what you do on a day-by-day basis, if you really want to touch the hearts of students and see them transformed and see your communities thriving and growing, and sooner or later you've got to ask the question, are you willing to face the dragon? And if you are, and if you're willing to persevere, and you're willing to stick at it, and you've got a group of people who are willing to support you, then I guarantee you, you'll see steps, you'll take steps, you'll see improvement, and it'll be worthwhile in the end. Even if you only achieve 60% of what you hope to out of it, that's a hell of a lot better than the alternative. So I look forward to, throughout today, to be able to continue to share some anecdotal elements and speak into your journey and support you in that, because there are a lot of nuances along the way that make a big difference. And we're still on a journey ourselves. We've seen improvement, we've been inspired by it, but we've still got a long way to go. But we're committed to it because we know if we stick at it,